My wife used the money I gave her to support her lovers and disappeared to her hometown, where she hid with one of them for weeks until my legal team found her for the divorce proceedings. Beamy, 29-year-old Marcus. This whole mess started way back, but legal stuff still dragging on. Wasn't planning to share this story, but after everything that happened, figure some of you Anons might relate or at least get a kick out of how it all went down. Didn't actually rush into marriage. Dated Victoria, 27 female, for 3 solid years before proposing. Met her at my buddy Kevin's barbecue. She laughed at my completely serious explanation of why you should never flip burgers more than once. Had this genuine laugh that just hit different. We moved in together after about a year when her lease expired. Made sense financially, and we were practically living together anyway. She'd leave clothes at my place. I had a drawer at hers. The natural progression. Victoria did freelance graphic design, small business logos, basic websites, occasional brochures for local restaurants. The kind of work you can do in pajamas with Netflix running in the background. Not exactly Fortune 500 stuff, but it paid her bills. She seemed content with the arrangement. I was doing network security for a mid-sized tech company. Corporate meetings, quarterly reviews, the usual grind. Nothing glamorous, but the money was solid. Bonuses were decent too, usually 3 to 4 grand depending on how many projects we closed. My brother Derek had reservations from day one. He's 5 years older, runs his own construction crew. Got completely destroyed in his divorce 3 years back. His ex took half his tools, the work truck. Even tried to claim part of his 401k. She knew exactly what would hurt him most. Just make sure you know who you're dealing with, he told me after we got engaged. Some women are world-class actresses until they find their next opportunity. Figured Derek was just gun-shy after his experience. His ex-wife had been calculating from the start. Married him right after he started making decent money. Filed for divorce the minute his business hit a rough patch. Victoria wasn't like that, though. She seemed genuinely happy with our quiet, stable life. We split expenses fairly at first. She handled utilities, groceries, and her Toyota Camry payment. Reliable car, nothing flashy. About what you'd expect for someone making freelance money. I covered rent, both insurance policies, internet, streaming services. The bigger monthly hits, basically. When we started seriously discussing buying a house, I offered to contribute more to savings since my income was higher and more predictable. Victoria actually seemed relieved. Said she'd always been terrible with long-term financial planning. Was glad I could handle the heavy lifting. Victoria's parents lived about 2 hours away, in one of those suburban developments where every house looks identical except for the mailbox. Robert was a retired Air Force guy. The kind of guy who still ironed his jeans and organized his garage like a military supply depot. Linda had taught middle school for 30 years before retiring. Sweet woman who always showed up with containers of leftovers whenever they visited. They approved of me pretty quickly. Stable job, clean background, wasn't trying to be a YouTuber or crypto entrepreneur. Robert especially appreciated that I had my life together and realistic goals. Victoria's always been our dreamer, Linda would say while helping clean up after dinner. She needs someone practical to keep her grounded. Looking back, that was a bigger red flag than I realized at the time. We weren't big spenders. Weekends usually meant meal prep, binge watching whatever series Victoria had discovered, and browsing Zillow for houses we couldn't afford yet. Victoria had this obsession with colonial houses that needed massive renovations. She'd bookmark properties that would have bankrupted us just in foundation work. Didn't mind the window shopping, though. We were building towards something real and it felt solid. Having someone to plan with. The first weird moment happened about 6 months into our house savings plan. I suggested we sit down and review our budget before meeting with a mortgage broker. Basic organization, making sure we had our documentation straight. Knew exactly what we could afford. Victoria got defensive immediately. Said talking about money made her anxious. Felt like I didn't trust her judgment. I backed off because it seemed like a minor issue, not worth fighting over. A few months later, she made a comment that should have set off alarms. I'm so glad I don't have to worry about the financial stuff anymore. You just handle all of that. At the time, it sounded like appreciation and division of labor. Looking back, it sounds like she was already mentally checking out of any real responsibility for our shared future. Another thing I noticed but didn't think much about, Victoria never logged into our joint savings account. Not once that I could tell. I'd offered to show her how to use the online banking, walk her through the mobile app. She'd laugh it off saying I was the numbers guy. She trusted me to handle it. She had full access to everything. The login information was saved on our shared laptop. I'd given her the debit card, even wrote down the account numbers for her, but apparently she never felt curious enough to check our progress toward the house fund. After 18 months of saving, I started weekend consulting. Network setups, server repairs, basic tech stuff. Added about $1,200 monthly to our fund. Victoria said she'd chase bigger design clients, but freelance was hit or miss. Good months brought her $3 or $4 grand. Bad months, maybe a few hundred. Didn't matter since I was covering most expenses anyway. Around 4 months after we got married, Victoria's schedule started changing. More client meetings that ran late into the evening. She'd come home after I was already asleep, smelling like restaurant food and apologizing for losing track of time. The client wanted to discuss revisions over dinner. They decided to expand the project scope and needed to hash out details. She started getting texts that made her smile and laugh more often too. Quick messages that would light up her face. Before she'd shake her head and put the phone away. When I'd ask what was funny, she'd wave it off. Just Maya being ridiculous, or client drama you wouldn't find it interesting. Maya was supposedly her college roommate. I'd met her maybe twice in 3 years. Nice enough woman, seemed normal, but they didn't act like particularly close friends when they were together. Somewhere around this time, Victoria changed her laptop password. When I mentioned it, she explained that she was organizing client files. Needed better security for their projects. Made perfect sense. She was handling some bigger accounts, and client confidentiality was important. She also started working out more. Joined a gym closer to downtown instead of using the one near our apartment. Said the new place had better equipment. Offered classes that fit her schedule. Started dressing slightly better for her client meetings too. Nothing dramatic, just more put together. Than her usual freelancer uniform of jeans and whatever shirt was clean. The last normal conversation we had was about mortgage rates. Victoria mentioned she'd seen something online about rates dropping. Maybe we should accelerate our house search timeline. She seemed distracted during the conversation. Kept checking her phone, but that wasn't particularly unusual for her. 3 days later, I logged into our savings account before a scheduled call with our mortgage broker. We'd been sitting at around $47,000. The number on my screen was 2,847. That meant just over $44,000 had vanished. Practically everything. I stared at that balance for what felt like 10 minutes, thinking there had to be some kind of mistake. Closed the browser, reopened it, cleared the cache, refreshed the page twice. The number didn't change. My first instinct was fraud. Someone had compromised our account, stolen our information, was probably working their way through other accounts too. It was the only explanation that made any sense. But when I pulled up the detailed transaction history, the withdrawals weren't random, multiple transfers to an account I didn't recognize, spread out over several weeks, ATM withdrawals from locations across town that we never used, Zelle and Venmo payments to names I'd never heard Victoria mention. One charge jumped out immediately. Concert tickets for some venue downtown. 2 tickets, 240 total, purchased on a night Victoria had told me she was working late. On a logo redesign for a local restaurant. I wasn't angry yet, just confused. Trying to piece together what was happening. Started systematically checking every linked account we had. Checking credit cards, PayPal, Venmo, anything that might show more suspicious activity. That's when I remembered the iPad we kept in the kitchen. For recipes and random internet browsing. Victoria had been using it the night before. To look up some complicated recipe she never ended up making. It was still plugged in on the counter. Still logged into all her accounts. I opened Safari and found several tabs still running from her session. Instagram, Pinterest, Gmail, and her iMessage account. That's where I found months of conversations with the guy Tyler. Not just emotional affair territory or inappropriate flirting. They were planning something specific and detailed. Screenshots of apartment listings, travel booking searches, a shared photo album labeled New Chapter, with pictures of places in Las Vegas and Henderson. One message from Victoria sent 2 weeks earlier. Once we hit 40,000, we can disappear for a while. Marcus won't see it coming until it's too late to stop us. Tyler's response, he's so focused on work and his spreadsheets. He hasn't even noticed what's happening right under his nose. Another exchange from a month before that. We'll be in Vegas by the end of April. Already found a place near Henderson, pool, gym, the whole lifestyle upgrade. Victoria's reply, can't wait to be done pretending this is enough for me. I sat there scrolling through months of messages, like I was reading someone else's nightmare. They'd been planning this systematically for at least 3 months, maybe longer. The client meetings lined up perfectly with timestamps, showing Victoria texting Tyler about meeting up. The late nights matched conversations about counting down the days, and almost time to get out of this place. There were photos too. Tyler at restaurants I recognized, places Victoria had claimed to be meeting potential clients. Tyler in what was clearly our apartment, taken from angles that showed he'd been there multiple times when I was at work. One photo showed him wearing my Dolphins jersey, sitting on our couch with Victoria's commentary. "Looks better on you anyway." I called Derek before doing anything else. He showed up 40 minutes later with coffee and his laptop bag, took one look at my face and didn't bother asking if I was okay. "What do you need?" he asked, surveying the mess of printouts I'd scattered across the kitchen table. "I need to document everything before she realizes I found out." Derek didn't waste time with sympathy or questions about my feelings. He just started helping me organize evidence systematically. Screenshots of conversations, financial records, location data from our shared Google account. That showed Victoria's movements during times she'd claimed to be working. "She's been planning this for months," I said, more to myself than to him. "Yeah, and she's about to learn that stealing someone's life savings has actual consequences." We spent the next 4 hours building a complete timeline. Every suspicious transaction, every lie about her whereabouts, every message that proved this wasn't some impulsive mistake or emotional breakdown. Victoria's phone had been off since I discovered the missing money. Her laptop was gone from the desk in our spare room where she usually worked. About half her clothes were missing from the closet, along with her jewelry box and both our passports. When I checked our shared Google location history, the timeline became crystal clear. The morning she'd made the final transfer from our savings account, Victoria had gone straight from our bank to an apartment complex across town. Then an hour later to Orlando International Airport. She hadn't panicked and run. She'd executed a plan with military precision, probably learned from watching her father organize logistics for 30 years. Her Toyota wasn't at the airport long-term parking. She'd left it in the visitor parking at Tyler's apartment complex, probably thinking that would buy her some time. Before I realized she was completely gone, I tried calling one more time, straight to voicemail with a generic message. Tried texting, messages delivered, but no response. After a week of silence, I stopped trying to reach her, started focusing on what I needed to do legally and financially to protect myself. Victoria thought she could drain our life savings and disappear with her boyfriend, using my money to fund their romantic adventure in Nevada. She'd badly underestimated how I was going to respond to having my future stolen. She'd spent months building an exit strategy. Now I was going to spend however long it took, building a case that would destroy whatever future she thought she was running toward. The research phase took about 2 weeks. I wanted to understand exactly what legal options I had before making any moves. Spent evenings reading family law statutes, looking up precedents for asset recovery, understanding the difference between divorce and criminal fraud. Derek helped me organize everything into categories: financial crimes, breach of fiduciary duty, intentional dissipation of marital assets. We built spreadsheets tracking every dollar that had been stolen and where it had gone. When I finally had enough documentation to present a coherent case, I started researching divorce attorneys. Found Catherine Hayes through the State Bar Association. She specialized in complex asset cases and high-conflict divorces, had solid reviews online, and most importantly, had experience dealing with spouses who tried to hide or steal marital property. Hayes was probably mid-50s, dressed like she meant business, had her legal pad ready before I even finished sitting down. I walked her through everything methodically. The screenshots, financial records, timeline of Victoria's disappearance. She listened without interrupting, taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. That showed she understood the implications. "Your wife left a remarkably clear paper trail which helps our case significantly," Hayes said when I finished my presentation. "But family court moves slowly and these cases get messy. This isn't going to be clean or quick." We filed divorce papers that week, along with emergency motions requesting immediate asset freezes and exclusive use of the house. The judge granted a partial freeze, meaning Victoria couldn't make any new withdrawals from accounts we could identify. But recovering what was already gone would take months of litigation. Getting Victoria served with the papers turned into its own challenge. The process server tried her friend Maya's house, Tyler's old apartment complex, even her former workplace where she'd supposedly been doing freelance projects. Victoria had called in some kind of emergency leave from her part-time design job, disconnected her phone, started using a completely new email address. That's when I decided it was time to involve her parents. Robert and Linda deserved to know what their daughter had done, and they might have information about where she was hiding. I drove to their house on a Saturday morning, found Robert in his garage organizing socket wrenches by size, with the kind of obsessive precision that only comes from decades of military logistics training. He looked surprised, but not unwelcome when I pulled into their driveway. "Marcus, everything all right? Where's Victoria?" I handed him copies of the bank statements and some of the most damning text message screenshots. "I need to show you what your daughter has been doing." Robert went completely quiet as he read through everything. Linda came out from the house, probably wondering who was visiting, joined us in the garage. Her expression shifted from curiosity to horror as she processed what she was seeing. "This can't be right," Linda said, her voice shaking. "Victoria wouldn't steal from you. There has to be some explanation." "She did steal from me and she disappeared with another man, using our house savings fund to finance their new life in Nevada." Robert's expression had shifted from confusion to something much harder. "Where is she now?" "I don't know. That's partly why I'm here. She needs to be served with divorce papers and she's actively hiding from the process server." Linda was crying, but Robert was already thinking practically. If she's using any credit cards or accessing accounts with our information, we might be able to track recent activity. My attorney has filed motions to freeze everything we can identify, but she probably has cash in accounts I don't know about. "Good strategy." Robert looked at the paperwork again, studying the timeline like he was planning a military operation. "What do you need from us? If she contacts you, I need to know immediately. And if you hear anything about where she might be staying, the court needs to serve her with these papers before she can hide assets, or make this more complicated." Linda wiped her eyes and looked directly at me. "We raised her better than this. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I don't know what happened to her." 2 days later, Robert called with useful information. Victoria had tried to use a credit card he'd added her to years ago for emergencies. The transaction was declined because of our asset freeze, but it had originated from a gas station in Henderson. We forwarded the information to Hayes and the process server immediately. Finally had a general area to focus the search. Victoria was served 3 days later at a budget motel outside Las Vegas. She'd been staying there with Tyler for almost 3 weeks, apparently burning through cash while trying to figure out their next move. The process server said she looked completely shocked when he handed her the papers, like she genuinely believed she could just disappear without any legal consequences. Victoria's response to being served was to immediately file a restraining order against me, claimed I'd been harassing and stalking her through shared accounts, had a documented history of controlling and intimidating behavior during our marriage. Complete garbage, but Hayes warned me that family courts tend to err on the side of caution. With domestic abuse allegations, regardless of how legitimate they actually are, judges don't want to be the one who ignored warning signs if something bad happens later. The restraining order hearing was scheduled before any of our divorce motions could move forward, which meant I had to clear my name of these false accusations. Before I could pursue recovery of the stolen money, we showed up early with a thick binder of documentation. Victoria was there, sitting next to a young attorney who looked like he'd just passed the bar and was taking whatever cases he could get. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, wearing clothes that seemed too big for her. Her attorney presented carefully edited text message excerpts and vague statements about emotional harm and feelings of being surveilled in her own home. Nothing specific, nothing corroborated, just implications and suggestions designed to make me look controlling. Hayes calmly explained that the messages in question were recovered from shared devices Victoria had voluntarily used in our jointly owned home, that all accounts I'd accessed were legally joint accounts, and that I hadn't contacted or attempted to harass Victoria in any way. I'd simply documented theft and fraud, using evidence that was legally available to me. But the real destruction came when Hayes called Robert as a witness. He testified that Victoria had contacted her parents multiple times, asking for emergency financial help, claiming I had cut off her access to everything and left her stranded in Nevada without resources. When he'd asked for specific details about what had happened, Victoria's story kept changing and contradicting itself. She couldn't explain why she'd been in Nevada in the first place. couldn't account for where the house savings had gone, eventually admitted she'd been staying with a friend, but refused to identify who or provide any details about the relationship. "My daughter has been fundamentally dishonest with her family," Robert said from the witness stand, his military bearing making every word carry weight. "The evidence, mister." Warren presented matches what we discovered independently when we tried to help her. Victoria took money that didn't belong to her and abandoned her responsibilities. The judge reviewed our documentation carefully. Financial records showing systematic withdrawals, location data proving Victoria had been lying about her whereabouts, and most damaging, the text messages showing months of premeditation. He issued a temporary no-contact order valid only until a follow-up hearing in 30 days, saying he wanted to monitor developments before making any permanent decisions. Victoria's eyes were red when she left the courtroom, but she didn't look in my direction. Tyler wasn't with her, which I found interesting. Found out later he'd bailed on her about a week after they got to Las Vegas, taking whatever cash remained from their adventure fund and disappearing completely. When the follow-up hearing arrived a month later, Victoria showed up with a different attorney, who looked like he'd taken the case as a personal favor and wasn't particularly happy about it. The judge had reviewed our updated documentation more thoroughly in the interim. Hayes had assembled additional proof that I'd been staying with Derek. The entire week, Victoria filed her restraining order, phone records showing 0 contact attempts, and more evidence of Victoria's systematic financial fraud. The judge dismissed the restraining order completely. The court finds no credible evidence of harassment, intimidation, or controlling behavior. What the court does find is clear and convincing evidence of intentional asset dissipation and attempted fraud. With that obstacle cleared, Hayes immediately refiled all our pending motions. Complete asset freeze, exclusive use of the house, and most importantly, a motion compelling Victoria to provide a full accounting of every penny of the missing $44,000. The judge granted everything. Victoria had 30 days to respond with complete documentation of where the money had gone. Supported by receipts, bank records, and detailed explanations, we knew she couldn't comply because most of the money was already spent on concert tickets, motel rooms, restaurant meals, and Tyler's disappearing act. Victoria's response to our accounting motion was pathetic. Her new attorney filed a brief claiming she'd used the money for legitimate business expenses and personal safety needs, but couldn't provide receipts, documentation, or credible explanations for anything. She claimed Tyler was a business partner, and the money had been invested in a consulting venture that hadn't worked out as planned. When pressed for details about this supposed business, everything fell apart immediately. The judge asked Victoria directly to explain specific transactions during the hearing. The concert tickets, the Las Vegas motel rentals, the cash withdrawals from ATMs near Tyler's apartment complex. Victoria's answers were vague and contradictory. She claimed she couldn't remember details because she'd been under severe emotional distress. Throughout the period in question, when the judge pressed her about Tyler's role, she finally admitted they'd been romantically involved, but insisted it hadn't influenced her financial decisions. "So you withdrew marital assets to fund a romantic relationship with your boyfriend?" Judge Martinez said, "Not a question, a statement of fact." Victoria's attorney tried to object, but Martinez cut him off. "The respondent has provided no credible accounting for $44,000 in marital assets. The court finds clear and convincing evidence of intentional dissipation of marital property." He granted all our motions. The asset freeze became permanent. I got exclusive control of the house and all remaining joint accounts, and Victoria was formally ordered to repay the full $44,000 plus 8% annual interest. But Hayes wasn't finished. During the discovery process, she'd uncovered that Victoria had opened several credit accounts, using our old address and joint credit history without my knowledge or consent. Classic identity fraud disguised as marital spending. We filed fraud claims on every account and reported the activity to all 3 credit bureaus. Victoria's credit score went from decent to catastrophic within weeks. The IRS had also opened an audit file based on information Hayes provided. Some of Victoria's bigger freelance clients had been paying cash, and she'd been sloppy about reporting it properly. Nothing massive, but enough inconsistencies to trigger an audit. When combined with the marital asset investigation, they wanted complete documentation going back 3 years, plus back taxes, penalties, and interest that would total more than she could possibly pay. Since we'd filed jointly for 2 of those years, They initially tried to include me in the audit, but Hayes provided everything proving Victoria had deliberately concealed the unreported income from me. Victoria was still living in cheap motels around Las Vegas, now completely alone and running out of options fast. Her parents had offered to let her come home, but only if she took full responsibility for what she'd done and made a genuine effort to make things right. She refused, still convinced she could find some way out of the consequences. Without admitting fault, Tyler had completely vanished from her life and social media. All his accounts deleted, phone disconnected. Even his apartment lease had been broken with no forwarding address. He'd taken whatever cash remained from their Las Vegas adventure and disappeared, leaving Victoria to face everything alone. By month 5 of the legal proceedings, Victoria had stopped responding to court filings entirely. She'd fired her second attorney after falling behind on payments and was attempting to represent herself, but kept missing deadlines and failing to show up for scheduled hearings. The default judgment hearing was surprisingly brief. No drama, no emotional speeches, just systematic presentation of facts. Hayes walked the court through everything methodically. The $44,000 withdrawn from joint accounts without consent, digital records showing Victoria traveling and spending money, while claiming to be emotionally distressed and unable to work, paper trails of prepaid cards, cash transactions, and transfers to Tyler's accounts, discovery from financial institutions confirming secret accounts and unauthorized credit activity, a certified letter from the IRS confirming an active criminal investigation with tax evasion implications. Judge Martinez ruled that Victoria had intentionally dissipated marital assets for personal benefit, which meant the money she'd spent wasn't just gone. It was now legally classified as debt she owed directly to me. $44,000 plus 8% annual interest compounded monthly until paid in full. Entered as a civil judgment with no expiration date, Hayes filed liens immediately on Victoria's credit. Her social security number, her future earning potential, garnishment orders that would automatically flag any legitimate paycheck she tried to earn, any bank account she tried to open, any credit application she attempted to submit anywhere in the country. The IRS had opened an audit file. Victoria's freelance income had gone unreported for years, and they were piling on penalties and interest. It wasn't criminal, not yet, but the case had been flagged for civil fraud. That meant the debt couldn't be discharged and would follow her for life. Victoria's life had become a legal minefield. She couldn't work legitimately because of garnishment orders. That would take most of any paycheck. She couldn't hide money because of the liens attached to her identity. She couldn't start over somewhere else because the debt and judgments would follow her wherever she went. Her parents finally cut her off completely. When she showed up at their house demanding emergency money and refusing to acknowledge what she'd done wrong, Robert told her she wasn't welcome back, until she took full responsibility and made a genuine effort to repair the damage. She was broke, alone, and facing financial consequences that would follow her for decades. The legal system was patient but relentless, and she'd made herself a target for systematic financial destruction. 8 months after Victoria emptied our savings account, she finally broke completely. I was working in my home office on a Thursday evening. When the doorbell rang, looked through the peephole, and couldn't believe what I saw. Victoria standing on my front porch, looking like she'd been living rough for weeks. Her hair was greasy and unkempt, longer than I'd ever seen it. Her clothes were wrinkled and too big, like she'd lost significant weight and was wearing whatever she could find. She looked desperate in a way I'd never seen before. Even during our worst arguments as a married couple, I opened the door but stayed in the doorway, not inviting her in. "What do you want, Victoria?" "I need to talk to you, please. Just 5 minutes." "You can talk from right there." She started crying immediately. Not the manipulative tears I remembered from our marriage when she wanted something, but raw, exhausted sobbing that seemed to come from somewhere deep and genuine. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I made a terrible mistake and I don't know how to fix it." "You don't fix it, you live with the consequences." "Please, I've lost everything. I can't get a job anywhere, I can't rent an apartment. I can't even open a bank account. The IRS is threatening to arrest me. I'm sleeping in my car most nights." I looked past her at the Toyota parked in my driveway, the same car she'd abandoned at Tyler's apartment complex 8 months earlier. It was filthy, dented, had a cracked windshield, and what looked like primer spots where she'd tried to fix rust damage herself. "Where's Tyler these days?" Victoria flinched like I'd physically hit her. "Gone. He left me the minute things got difficult. Took what money we had left and just vanished. Haven't heard from him in months. Sounds familiar, funny how that works out. She actually fell to her knees on my front porch, right there on the concrete, begging like her life depended on it. Please, Marcus, I'm begging you. I'll pay you back every penny. I'll do whatever it takes. Sign whatever you want me to sign, just please help me figure out how to get out of this. I looked down at her kneeling there, completely broken, and felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, no lingering anger. Just cold recognition that this was what consequences looked like. When they finally caught up with someone, you want to know how to get out of this? You don't. You destroyed your life for a piece of garbage who dumped you the second things got complicated? You stole from me, lied to me, tried to ruin my reputation in court, and thought you were clever enough to get away with it. There's no getting out of what you did. I'll give you everything, the car, whatever money I can scrape together. I'll get a job and pay you back every penny with interest. You can't get a job that pays enough to matter? Every employer who runs a background check is going to see the liens and garnishment orders. You can't rent a decent apartment because your credit is destroyed. You can't start over because the debt follows you wherever you go. Victoria was sobbing harder now, her whole body shaking. What am I supposed to do? You should have thought about that before you decided to screw Tyler with my money in Nevada. Please, Marcus, I'm begging you, I'll do anything. I'll sign whatever documents you want. I'll admit everything publicly. I'll tell everyone what I did. Just please help me. I looked down at her kneeling there, completely broken, and realized this was probably the first time in her adult life that Victoria had faced real consequences for her choices. Your parents offered to help you months ago. You turned them down because you didn't want to take responsibility. Your friends offered you places to stay. You burned those bridges by lying about what happened and trying to make yourself the victim. You had multiple chances to handle this with some dignity, and you chose to keep running and lying instead. I was scared. You were selfish, and now you're broke, homeless, and facing criminal charges that could put you in federal prison. That's not bad luck, Victoria. That's cause and effect. I turned to go back inside. Wait, please, what if I sign over the car? What if I file for bankruptcy and try to clear some of this debt? I stopped and looked back at her one final time. Bankruptcy won't clear the IRS debt or the civil judgment I have against you. Those follow you forever. And your car isn't worth $5,000 on a good day. You stole $44,000, Victoria, plus interest, plus penalties, plus all my legal fees. You owe me more than you'll make in the next 5 years. Assuming you could even find legitimate work with your legal baggage. So there's nothing I can do? You can stop pretending you're the victim here. You made calculated decisions for months. You planned this whole thing step by step, executed it like a military operation, and tried to disappear with my money. To start a new life with your boyfriend? The fact that your plan didn't work out the way you hoped doesn't make you tragic. It makes you a thief who got caught. Victoria stayed on her knees, crying and shaking. I loved you. I really did love you. No, you didn't. You loved the security I provided and the comfortable life I built for us. You loved having someone else handle all the adult responsibilities, while you played at being an artist. The minute you got bored or found something that looked more exciting, you were willing to destroy everything we'd built together to get what you wanted. I opened my front door and paused one last time. Your parents would probably still take you back? If you went to them honestly, took full responsibility for what you've done, and showed them you understand how badly you screwed up. But you'd rather kneel on my porch begging me to fix your life than admit to them that you're not the victim in this story. She was still crying when I closed the door and locked it. Through the window, I watched her sit in that broken-down Toyota for almost an hour, just staring at the steering wheel. Before finally driving away, I never saw her again after that night. But the legal system kept working like clockwork. Garnishment orders, liens, IRS correspondence. Every few months I'd get updates showing that Victoria's debt was growing faster than any minimum wage job could pay it down. The interest and penalties were accumulating faster than she could possibly keep up with. 6 months later, Robert called to tell me Victoria had finally moved back in with them. She finally found work at a grocery store, one of the few places that didn't run credit checks. Every paycheck gets garnished at the maximum legal rate, so she's basically working to pay you back while living in her childhood bedroom. She'd already been fired from 2 jobs after HR flagged the garnishment orders. No company wanted that kind of liability on payroll. She'd be paying me back in small installments for the next decade, assuming she could even maintain steady employment with her legal baggage. She's different now, Robert said, defeated really. I think she finally understands what she threw away. Good. Maybe she'll think twice before stealing from the next guy. There won't be a next guy anytime soon. No one wants to date someone carrying her kind of baggage. Credit destroyed, garnished wages, criminal record pending. Victoria had rolled the dice on Tyler and our marriage, thinking she could upgrade her life using my money as startup capital for her adventure. Instead, she'd traded a stable future with someone who genuinely cared about her. For a decade of financial servitude and social isolation, some lessons cost more than others. This one cost her everything she had and everything she could have had. She'd be paying for it financially and socially until she's pushing